morning, everybody. And firstly, I would like to thank Igor and everybody behind the organisation of the event for inviting me to come out here and speak to you today. As Igor's just mentioned, not only do I work for the Motor Insurers Bureau in the UK, looking after their counter-fraud programme, as well as being a technical claims manager, I also involved with the Council Bureau on their fraud working group, which I now chair. And as Igor knows, we're very busy at the moment, as the Supervisory Board have set us some tasks to deal with by September. But that's not the purpose of today. So, what I'm going to run through today, as the intro slide says, is what do we do in the UK to combat fraud? What's our approach? I'm going to have a little look at the history so we understand how we got to where we are today. Obviously what's going on today, then the future, and I'll finish off with a case study on a live situation that we have going on in the UK at this moment. Okay. I first got involved in fraud 25, 30 years ago. I was a training officer at an insurer at that time and got asked to do the training on a new system that the company was introducing at that time. Having delivered that training over a period of months, I said to my then boss, I've done training for 2 years, I want to go back to being a claims handler. And as it turned out, one of my colleagues, who's then the team leader for our fraud unit, had decided that he was going to retire, and I took over his team, and that was the start of my journey in fraud. But prior to that, what did we do to handle fraud? Well, it's very, very isolated. We had individual handlers who obviously had an interest and had a flair for detecting fraudulent claims, but it was very low scale. It wasn't organised. We weren't structured in the way we dealt with it. Gradually, companies realised that they needed to use these people that had the skills, the right mindset. And I always say, fraud investigators, fraud handlers, we're all a bit weird in the way we're wired in our heads, because we ask those awkward questions and random questions, or seemingly random questions, that are actually looking for answers. So we started to set up dedicated teams in insurers. But the problem at that stage was, we as insurers and fraud handlers, we weren't talking to other companies. We didn't know what other companies were seeing. There was no sharing of what trends were emerging. And that was at the point when we were starting to see organised crime come into what we were dealing with. As we began to talk, we'd start picking up on these things, and a few people would talk to a few other companies, and that led to the foundation of what we refer to as IFIG, Insurance Fraud Investigators Group. Now, slightly misleading to say it's insurance fraud, because we also had investigators, legal firms join up, and in more recent years the membership's been expanded. But it was the start of a sharing process. It was the start of a channel whereby we could post messages about what we were seeing, so that other people who were in the group could be aware of it and look for that in their own data. At the same time, that's when we got our first data washing systems. Those wonderful systems that look for the same phone number, the same names, the same addresses, and so on and so on. They were quite simplistic in the early days in what they did, but they were functional, they worked, they helped, and it enhanced people's awareness of what was going on. And as we became more and more aware of the level of criminality that's involved, and particularly the arrival of the organised crime groups and the start of targeting of insurance for fraudulent claims. it would be a few years later before we saw fraudulent policy inceptions, which is a problem we all face even today. From there, we went to an organisation that some of you might know of, which is the Insurance Fraud Bureau. It was a decision to set the IFB up by our Association of British Insurers. That's 20 years ago, since that organisation came into being. Their remit was purely in the MTPL market and to look specifically at organised crime. They weren't tasked with looking at individual cases of people doing opportunistic fraud or any other type of insurance fraud. It was, as I say, just purely motor. They had their first success within 2 years of being set up, and it's an organisation that is funded by insurers. We all have to pay to be a member of the organisation and to use its services. But it's become the model for a lot of other countries around the world who now have similar organisations. And dare I say, in some cases, they're probably doing better than what the IFB are doing. You've gone to the next level of what we're doing. In today's market, I question whether we're joined up in what we're doing. Yes, the motor market is very much better than what it was when it started, but we're missing opportunities, I think. I was involved in some research about 12 years ago where a group of insurers were provided data from a number of banks and also some data from the government department that looked after benefit claims, so it's unemployment benefits and things like that. And when we analysed that data, the number of people that we were identifying as being involved in fraud within the banking industry or within the benefit area was scary. The crossover was unbelievable. We knew that it was happening. We'd always felt it was happening, but it was the justification to support that view. Unfortunately, our government of the day decided that there wasn't a benefit from carrying on with that as a long-term thing. And it's something we as an industry have constantly gone on at our subsequent governments to say, we need to share this data with you. We need to have that dialogue with you. Yes, we as insurers, if we come across benefit fraud, we'll report it, we'll do the right thing, but we never ever get anything the other way. The banks equally, they're a long, long way behind the insurance market. They do great stuff internally with what they do and what they're looking for, but again, they're in a place where they won't share with each other very much, and they certainly won't share with insurers. And where we're dealing with organised crime, one of the things we want to do is follow the money that gets paid out. Where does it go? We know who we paid. What we don't know is where the money moves on to. And the only way we can get any traction on that is if we get the police involved. They have the ability to then ask the banks to disclose that information, but we as insurers can't ask that information. Very occasionally, a bank might contact us with some information, with some questions about something they're seeing, but it is the exception. It's unusual. The latest government that we have in the UK, one of their mandates is the introduction of an insurance task force. And I have to say, in the early days of this government, it was very positive. But for the last 4 or 5 months, we've heard nothing. We're not surprised. It's what we expected. But they're looking at it, they're going, can we reduce premiums? Is fraud part of that desire? Well, yes, if we can stop fraudulent claims, it obviously puts money back in the business, it stops money being paid out, and we don't have to charge so much to allow for that fraud expenditure. But they've also brought back in this idea of cross-industry collaboration. It remains to be seen how that gets on. I really hope they do push this forward, but it's still a problem for us. I have to say, those of us who've been in the industry for many years involved in the fraud fighting, I shouldn't say this perhaps as it's being recorded, but we have our ways around GDPR. It's a problem for us, but yeah, pick up the mobile phone, have a conversation. What have you got on this person, or what have you got in this claim? Do I need to make a formal data protection request? And they'll go, no, you're wasting your time. Or yes, we've got something. And you know that you can spend the time doing it. Where I'm going with that is actually trying to get our new handlers coming into the fraud market to actually think in the same way, to work on building up those relationships, because it is the only way that we can go forward. It's the way we find out that Mr. X is actually committing fraud, not just on my company or Allianz or one other insurer, but they're actually doing it on a very large scale across multiple industries. I know we're going to be talking about AI in the next presentation, but it is one of the things we're having to deal with today. It's there. The problem is detection, getting the systems in place to do it, having the right systems in place. Have our companies got the right equipment to do it and the right desire to do it? But as I say, that's something that we'll be looking at further. The IFB's grown tremendously since it started, and they actually share offices with the MIB. They've moved from doing just that top percentage of organised crime. They now look at household and travel, casualty fraud as well. I've just been talking with one of their senior people in the last few weeks about a cross-border case that they're involved in. MIB and another insurer in the UK has experience or exposure to, and we're dealing with colleagues in France, Denmark, and the Netherlands, because this one individual from England, he has 6 claims across Europe, and we're working on how do we get him, how do we stop him. The problem for the IFB is the way they were structured. Their original business articles of association actually stipulate that they're only supposed to work in the motor market, which is a problem technically, because as I say, they're doing household, they're doing travel, even pet, and they're going through a process at the moment of rewriting the company structure to enable them to actually do those areas of business legitimately, broaden the membership, bringing in life insurance. There are 2 life insurers in the UK who are desperate to join in what we're doing, because they believe that not only have they got fraud within the life insurance market, but they're of the view that these individuals are conducting fraud in other areas, and they want to share with us. As a result of that, there is a very big program going on with the IFB to change that structure, to enable us to do that other work with other parties. And part of the problem is we have some large fleet operators in the UK, such as our postal service, who are self-insured up to a point. For them, any claim under £250,000, they pay. It's only when the claim goes over that £250,000 deductible that their insurer kicks in. they can't join the IFB because the IFB is actually set up that you have to be an insurer. So they can't join directly, and that's causing a problem with some of the organised crime, that they can't share their data and tap into the other data that's in there to help them move forward. But that's part of where we're going for the future. We've just had agreement to move forward on it from the board of the IFB. So later this year, all the existing members will be signing up to a new business arrangement with the IFB, and then they're going out to other companies and other classes of insurance that want to be involved. Going forward, when it comes to fighting fraud, AI, it's the buzzword for everybody. And it is a problem, it is there. And I'll leave that until we come back to it later on. Government involvement, as I say, we have some government involvement, remains to be seen where that's going to go, but I really, really hope that they join, support what we want to do and move things forward. But like everything, government policies have competing ideas and priorities, and we're not up the top of the list. We're not even halfway up the list. We're in the bottom half, which is really strange when you think that fraud, certainly in the UK, in all its guises, so romance fraud, fraudulent policy inceptions, people trying to scam people online, it's our biggest crime by a long, long way in its widest sense. So it is a problem. The other thing that is an issue is public perception of fraud. A lot of claimants think it's all right to inflate their claim a little bit when they make a claim. So, you know, that laptop that fell off the table and got broken, oh, it was a new high market, high spec version, when in fact it's probably 6 years old. It's probably just about to be thrown in the bin because it's on its last legs, and it wasn't very good anyway. That's the sort of thing we have to deal with within the market. And the public don't or didn't particularly see fraud as an issue. But we are now, as an industry in the UK, we're looking at how we can put that message out. How can we make the public aware? And within the motor market, over the last 18 months, we've run 3-4 campaigns, because we just launched another one, to make the public aware of some of the scams. So we're going from the fake broker, the ghost broker as we call them, the person who's pretending to be an insurance broker, taking money off members of the public, saying they've got a policy. They never ever had a policy because it was never actually put in place, or if they do, they cancel the policy very quickly and take the money back. The poor person who thought they were insured then has an accident 6 months later, and then they find they're uninsured, and then they have the MIB come knocking up their door if they were the fault party, saying you owe us for whatever it's cost us to pay out to the victims of the claim. So there's a big cost, and people don't appreciate the big cost of that. We're also using campaigns to make people aware of the types of fraud that are going on. So as I say, Ghost Broker, the one that's just come out literally in the last 10 days is our colleagues in the IFB have identified a massive surge in claims that a type of claim that we first saw 10 years ago. We went through a spate of claims where people were bashing their door mirrors with oncoming cars and causing damage, and it was being done deliberately, but it quite quickly stopped. It was very short-lived. But what we've seen in parts of London in the last few months is something similar, but not quite the same, in that you can be driving down a residential road and you hear a bang. That bang is a stone or something similar being thrown at your car to make you think that you've just collided with a parked car as you're going past it. The victim then stops you and they go, look at my car, my door mirror's broken. I want £500 off you. And they will literally try and force you to go to a cash machine to get the cash out of your bank account. They're extremely aggressive in that. So we've literally just started a campaign to make people in that particular area of London aware of what's going on, to try and stop it. But what we've learned in the last few days is it's already moving. It's appearing in other parts of the country. So we're now looking at that campaign, widening it out into a bigger area. Now, the problem with these campaigns for us is that the IFB does not have a huge pot of money to run campaigns. So it is relying on the insurers to help support these campaigns, and we're getting a lot of take-up from our big insurers in the country on that. I did promise Igor I'd do a case study. And this one is a live one. We don't have a conclusion, I will warn you, and you'll see why. In the UK, we have what we call the gig economy. Part of the gig economy is individuals who are kind of self-employed, and as a result, we have a very big market for people riding mopeds and small motorbikes, delivering food. So your McDonald's and food from various restaurants that have signed up to these delivery services. They come under the Uber Eats banner, amongst others. There are several big companies that you'll recognise from the taxi market who are involved in these industries, in these businesses. What we picked up back in 2020 was the first signs of these claims coming in. And there was a particularly unique feature at that stage in that, again, it was only occurring in a few parts of London, but the so-called victims, the people riding these mopeds, all had Brazilian-sounding names. Interestingly, not all of them are Brazilians. We have seen people whose identity documents come from Spain, Portugal. Both of those are understandable. What we didn't get was Italy, and we've seen quite a few with Italian nationality documents. Obviously, seeing this trend start to appear, as insurers, we started to talk about it. And what we quickly realised is that these accidents in the early days were staged. I'm sure you've all sort of seen the bit of film of the guy who comes along with his moped and he's coming at you as you're coming out the side turning, and he stops, throws the bike on the floor and jumps off, then claims you've hit him. This was very common, and there have been a few very classic pieces of video from dashcam. Thank heavens for dashcam, it's a lifesaver. It's moved from that. We have, I think one of the crazy ones is we have 7 mopeds that were pushed over by a lorry reversing. They were all nicely parked up behind this lorry. Yeah, we don't believe that really happened. The problem is, of course, proving it. As this has gone on, the problem has grown. It's affected more and more of London and the home counties. it's transferred out to other cities in the country. It took quite a while. This was a real surprise. It was a good 2 years before that started to happen. But what we've noticed is it's happening where there are areas of a Brazilian community. Even in my own home area, just down the road from me in Bournemouth, there's a Brazilian community, and within the last few months we've seen claims appearing down there that fit this same MO of claim. The problem is we think these people are effectively franchising the model, so that we've identified specific groups of people in some areas, and we're finding that there are other groups of people in other areas. But the problem for us was actually establishing that we have these different groups operating across the country, and even within the same area. So it's been quite difficult to try and target specific individuals. There is one group where one of our legal firms has identified that the individuals involved all come from the same small area in Brazil. It's literally a 10-mile radius of where they come from. And we strongly believe that there's probably a closer connection than that. There's probably a connection through work or schools or something of that nature, where these people know one another, or they know somebody who knows somebody, and then when they've come over here to the UK, they're being sucked into the thing. What we're also aware of is that when these individuals are submitting these claims to the various claims companies, is that they receive money for it from the people who are referring the claims on to the insurers. They'll get £250, £500 straight away. And if you're in an environment, working in an environment where you are very lowly paid, £250 cash with the taxman not taking any of it off you is worth having. It's a thing. The MO has evolved. When it was first identified, we had a couple of very distinct, clear enablers in what was happening. All the claims were being routed through one solicitor, one legal firm, and they'd invariably have a claim for a hire moped that would come from the same business. There would be claims for storage of motorbikes. And quite often when you look at those, you'll go, hold on, you've got a garage. Why does your bike need to be with a repairer in storage when you've got your own garage at home where you could store it and things like that? But it's all part of the inflation of the claim to make money out of it. What we've seen in the last 12, 18 months is the introduction of additional enablers, because obviously they became aware we were targeting the firms that we knew about. We were looking at them, and I know in my own organisation, any claim that comes in from that firm, we take into our investigation unit. We will look at it and we will work it. Even if we think it might be clean, it might be a good file and not a fraudulent file, we will still work it just for consistency. Obviously, once all insurers start doing that, the people behind the fraud then had to find another way to submit their claims and carry on making money. So as I say, they've introduced new enablers to do that. We quite quickly cottoned on to that fact because we knew that we were looking for these Brazilian names. So naturally, we still look for it. What they've introduced now is what I call the recycled claim. I like to think they're environmentally friendly in a way, in that what they're doing is they are using engineering evidence that's been manipulated. They'll have changed the dates, they'll have changed the names, but the actual content of the damage description and any photos with it is the same as what we've seen in other cases, in other claims. The problem with that is because it's across the industry, is identifying when and where that's happening. We don't have a system for sharing photos of damage within insurers and scanning it for similarity, for repetitive use. I know one of our European colleagues, they are actually going down that route at a national level. They've introduced a program to actually look at that information and search for it again. But how have we actually combated this problem? We did it in the traditional way initially. We're insurers, we talk to one another, we try and find the links between the parties involved, the commonalities, and we've pushed back. We then started to find a few interesting things that identity papers may not be what we thought they were. We do now know that there are at least a few claims in there where the identity papers are fake. They're very good fakes. I know that in one case it's actually been our borders agency who look after immigration that have identified that the passport that had been presented was a fake, but they said in their eyes it's one of the best they've seen. So us as claims handlers, we haven't got a chance of identifying that very easily. What we've realised is that because this is such a big problem, we've tried to break it up into little bits as we've identified little bits. But we then had to bring in other agencies. So we have obviously the police. We have a good working relationship as an insurance industry with IFED, which is the Insurance Fraud Enforcement Department. It's part of the City of London Police, who are the lead force on fraud in the UK. And IFED is actually funded by the insurance industry. They don't do just motor, they do artwork, casualty, holiday, travel insurance and pets and all sorts. Yeah, you wouldn't believe that vets are fraudulent. They submit the same invoice for a treatment on an animal over and again. Borders Agency has proved quite useful. They've actually come out on some of the raids that the police have done. And the reason for that is, A, they're looking for illegal immigrants, people who've overstayed their visa to stay in the UK. What we find quite often is when we know where somebody is, or we think they've gone, they've left the country. So much so that there are a couple of cases where claims have been pushed into the court process, and at trial we're actually doing video conferences with the claimant from Rio. They're out in Rio on a video call. It's an interesting approach, but it takes them away from the clutches of the UK law to get them. Borders Agency have also highlighted that there are many of these identities that are questionable, that they are fake in one way or another. Local government, local authorities, we have what we call trading standards authorities. They're an organisation that looks at retail shops and service providers because you have to meet certain standards and do certain things. They have powers that the police do not have. Borders Agency have different powers to what the police have. So by bringing in different agencies, when we're doing raids, it gives us the opportunity to use those different powers to get in and find stuff. We may not have, that's something that ticks the box under the Fraud Act in the UK, but when they go in, Borders Agency, we're looking for illegal immigrants, Borders Agency go in, oh, Here's a box of paperwork for fraudulent claims. That can then be seized and can be used by the police, but they can't go looking for it on their own back. They need that way in. And it's probably our first big multi-agency exercise of this type going forward. Where have we got with it? Well, we're at a point where we are defeating a lot of these claims. They're not being paid. What we haven't managed to do is get the people behind it and get them into the criminal court process. We have good ideas who some of them are. There is a question mark around some of those identities, whether they are genuine or not. But that's where we want to go. We do want to try and get those people and bring them to justice. Remains to be seen if we can do that, but that's the goal. We want to get them. We want to punish them. We're fraud handlers after all. That's what we do. And that's me done. Thank you.